That's devastating. And this is a very educated group. I've seen most of y'all very consistently, so I'm not going to give you a quick, cute little 3-point speech because you don't need one, and that would be insulting your intelligence. But what I will tell you is something I think is incredibly important, and it's going to be a part of the ballot test of this year, on November the 6th. You see, some of us believe in freedom, right? Others want equality. Now, if you don't pay too close of attention, you might think that freedom and equality really go together. But freedom and outcome goes together. So if you want freedom, you've got to be willing to do the input to get to the outcome you want. If you think equality is what you're really looking for, what you're really saying is that everybody gets exactly the same thing no matter your effort. So if 50% of the people are paying taxes, let's go on this side, and 50% of the people are not paying taxes, equality says you get what they get, and they get what you get without any questions asked about your individual effort. See, that definition of equality is wrong. It's not right. The definition of freedom is very different. And America is the country that embodies the very definition of freedom. And what freedom says, according to the unalienable rights, is that according to your inputs, you determine your outcome. And that's being free to win, but it's also being free to lose. In some way, somewhere along the journey, we seem to have lost the concept of freedom. And so now we're faced with a president who believes that men and women of all states of life, no matter their efforts, should all be equal. And the clearest demonstration of that concept of equality is our Supreme Court's ruling on Obamacare. And in order to get to that ruling, this is what had to happen. And I know y'all pay attention, but we had to take what the Democrats said wasn't a tax and convert it into a tax and not a penalty so that the Supreme Court could rule on it. And then they ruled on it as if it were a tax to find it constitutional. So you had to do something that was unconstitutional to make an unconstitutional ruling. It chokes me up too. I just got to tell you that if we think the last 4 years has been difficult on the cause of freedom, if you put Obamacare on top of 4 more years, so you get my point. Yeah. But let me give you one last point, one last example. And I'm going to open it up for 30 or 40 minutes. I'm going to take lots of questions, and hopefully we'll cut a cake. I'm asking you all to volunteer on my campaign because we have to win here locally, and we have to win as a nation. So I'm going to ask for your help. Last example. I was on Fox News on Monday night. And there was this crazy lady. My mama told me to treat women with high levels of respect. I waited until she slapped me twice. But after the second time, we had to have a conversation. And she wouldn't quit talking. But here's what she wanted to say. President Bush ended a program that President Obama knows nothing about, but uses an executive privilege to have an executive order to protect the Attorney General, even though he knows nothing about it. That's right. That just seems a little fishy to me. But here's what makes it almost hard to digest. And this is a very serious part of where we are. But Border Patrol agent, Brian Terry, lost his life because of a gun running or walking program sponsored by his government and those weapons were found at the scene of his death. And we're saying to his family that the information that was absolutely acknowledged to be false, that was delivered to the members of Congress, and then 10 months later they retracted it, with over 90,000 pages of information disseminated between the departments. They say releasing that information would not be in the best interest of the family, Congress, or more importantly, than the American people. You see, the last thing that we have to remember that's on the ballot this year is the whole notion of the rule of law.
Yes.
You see, when you're president of the United States, or when you're a member of Congress, and you don't like what happens, you don't get to take your ball and go home. You just don't get to do that. And so what we're seeing happen in this nation is someone that says, if I don't like the laws, I simply will not enforce them. If I won't do my job, I will stop the states from doing theirs. And the more we see that proliferate throughout the landscape of this nation, the harder it is to say to the next generation of Americans, because of the rule of law, all men and women have the right to freedom. Because without the rule of law, it doesn't work for anyone. And the clearest example of that was a couple hundred years ago. There was a fellow named Frederick Douglass. Anybody ever heard of Frederick Douglass?
Yes, sir.
Who argued that because of the rule of law, everyone in this nation must be free to pursue their highest potential of outcome. And he used the Constitution to set more people free. Without that rule of law, he felt like he had no ground to stand on. And so with his life, he was willing to protect the Constitution. And I will tell you that it is in that place, in that sweet spot, that America rises again. We rise on the strength of the rule of law that applies to all men and all women in this great place we call America. And if we do not defend the rule of law by putting men and women into office who will be responsible to abide under the rule of law, we jeopardize the very nature and definition of freedom. And I'm typically a very excited, optimistic person. Now, I will tell you, I'm not as excited and optimistic as I was a few days ago, because I'm irritated with the fact that we continue to expect the average person in America to bear the burden for people who will not do what they can do. I find that irritating. If you cannot, one category. If you will not, you should not reap the benefits of this great nation. And that's why. With that, Michael Sally, I'm going to open it up to questions, and I'm happy to start back here with the great one, yellow. Thank you.